This is a presentation from Winchester Academy.
Okay, everyone, we're getting ready to go. Tonight, we want to thank Diane Forsyth, who has sponsored tonight's program in memory of her parents, Jane and Ernie Lindgren. Is Diane here? Nope, not tonight. Okay. A big thanks to the Wapaka Area Public Library for welcoming us back. This is the first time we've been able to come back into this room. And we want to thank all of you for coming. Oh, Diane is here. Thank you, Diane. Thank you. My name is Anita Olsen. I'm a trustee of the Winchester Academy. We welcome you to this exciting Winchester Academy series of events entitled Roots of Jazz. This is something new for Winchester, an opening night, and then a full week of special performances and lectures that focus on one theme, the roots of jazz. The three roots of jazz are ragtime piano playing, West African drumming and dancing, and singing the blues. The Roots of Jazz celebration continues then May 2nd through May 9th. Please note that you have to have tickets for 3 of the events. The tickets are free, but because of limited space, we need to ask you to go to the booksellers and pick up those tickets. You also have the opportunity to look at the painting, original artwork by Doris Weed. This painting was commissioned by the Roots of Jazz Committee, and a final bid will be on May 9th, when we'll see who has bid up to the top amount. We thank our many supportive partners, without whom this series of events would not have been possible. The list of our supporters are on a list over here. We'd like you to take a look and be able to say thank you to them. Tonight, after our mini drama, please join us at the opening of the library's exhibit room. If you go through these doors, you'll go right across the children's library and into the exhibit room. You'll learn more about Eddie Henson and about this time in America's musical history. And we will be greeted by Wapaka High School Jazz Ensemble playing a couple of Eddie Henson's tunes. The exhibit is in collaboration with the library, the Wapaka Historical Society, and Winchester, and that exhibit runs through June 4th. Tonight, you will hear about Wapaka's personal connection with the music of this time. You'll get to know more about Eddie Henson. So please sit back, enjoy the Durable Dane performed by Phair and Linda Harmon. Thank you.
Yeah, go play. Ragtime. That's what she's playing. Ragtime. Greatest musical sound, and I ought to know. I wrote that song back around 1908. Called it Rattlesnake Rag. Sadly, it didn't make me much money till decades later, and I could have used it when I was young. One of my more popular songs, Rattlesnake Rag, I like the title too. Gives the song a sense of dangerous energy, don't you think? A snake about to strike? Well, ragtime has a beat that you can dance to, has a beat that makes you want to jump. But like fire. Don't get too close because it can burn you. You snicker, but it's true. Popular music was changing about the time right before the First World War. I was a child. I was born in 1893. But I love that wild syncopation, that crazy beat of ragtime. It consumed me for the better part of my life. And I loved it, but dangerous at the same time. Ragtime music could make you swoon. But I also learned, like the sirens of ancient Greece calling Odysseus home, it had destructive tendencies. Oh yes, I learned about that too. Anyway, I've decided to write my memoir. Make a book out of my life. It's hard work. I can't remember everything, so I have to take down a lot of notes. And when I'm all done, I hope to have an autobiography. I'm not sure anybody outside my family will read it, but I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic even. That's why I have all these notes to remind me of all of the things that have happened. Well, let me start at the beginning. My father was Gustav Henson. His real name was August. He was born in 1851 in Denmark. When he was a youngster, he and his family immigrated to the United States. He was classically trained on the violin, and he played the trumpet too. So DNA was sort of, our music was part of our family DNA. He played in several orchestras, my father, but sadly for me, he hated ragtime music. He thought that ragtime music was born out of a kind of a low-class system. He equated ragtime to music you might hear in Negro juke joints. Or maybe you'd hear ragtime coming out of the windows of tenement houses in big cities. Or you'd hear that music in dance halls layered with sweaty bodies. He hated ragtime music. But it was, as I wrote down in my notes, if I was to learn music, he said, you will learn on the violin. But here's the rub. I hated the violin. No, not when somebody else played it. Well, then it was okay. It was fine then. When I was maybe 8 or 9 years old, Gustav brought a violin to our house. He wanted me to play. I refused. I wanted nothing to do with the violin. He got angry. He argued with my mother because she knew that I preferred the piano. And in the end, he hit me right over the head with that violin. Smashed it into pieces. I believe when that violin shattered, Gustav smashed any hope of me following in his classically trained footsteps. But then it would have been difficult for me to follow in Gustav's footsteps in any manner because we, my siblings and I, were abandoned by Gustav at a very early age. Anyway, I better explain more about my family, huh? Hopefully these pages, which I'm working on, and the notes I'm writing down, will give you a bit more insight into my early life. And then we can get on with the good stuff. You know, my years as a successful composer and a famous keyboard player, and have Linda play some of my work. I mean, that's what you paid good money to hear tonight, right? What? Yes. Oh, this is a free show? Oh, my. Well, Linda, I guess you and I won't be getting any money. We won't be going out to Simpsons for cocktails afterwards, will we? Well, drinks, by the way, are a lot cheaper at Simpson's than they are at my favorite watering hole in Chicago, the Arsonia Club, but I'll tell you about that later. Well, despite the lack of profits, Linda, I think I need a drink. So while I'm pouring myself a nice glass of cold water with nothing in it but good cold water, why don't you play one of my songs, Moon Maid. That's a catchy little number. You're welcome. Thank you, Linda. Well, let's see, where was I? Oh, yes, my family. I was to unravel a few more tidbits about my birth, and on the way in here, wait a minute, it dawns on me that there might be a big mistake in tonight's program. That's right, the printing of tonight's program may in fact be incorrect. Can I borrow your program for a second? Thank you. Let's see here on the second page. Time of place, right here in the library, the time. Sure, there it is. My name. It's incorrect. You'd think after all the years and with this program that at least my name would be correct. What's wrong with it, you say? My birth name, that's what. It's not Eddie Hansen. No, nor Edward Hansen, nor Edmund Hansen, nor any other legitimate Christian surname. My birth name is Ethwell Hansen, spelled E-T-H-W-E-L-L. That's what the program should say, at least in an asterisk. Eddie comes decades later. Ethwell. Quite a name, isn't it? How many other Ethwells in the audience? I didn't think so. Here's how my name came about. I was the firstborn in my family, and my mother, Henrietta, she was convinced she was going to have a girl. She wanted to name it after her favorite sister named Ethel. Well, when a son arrived, she simply said, "Oh, well," and named me Ethwell. And if that weren't bad enough, my middle name was Idair, I-D-A-I-R. Ethwell Idair Hansen. Now there's a mouthful for you. Can you imagine being named Ethwell as a kid? I was teased at school a lot. A lot of parents and older adults thought it was a girl's name. Not easy, I tell you, but my mom, Henrietta, she had her heart in the right place, and she loved me very much. So I guess I forgave her for putting that anchor of a name around my neck. Speaking of being born, I came into this world in New London, of all places. I know. Most people think I was born in Waupaca because of the hundreds of other Hansons in the area. I might even have some relatives in the audience. Any Hansons here tonight? No? Well, if it's O-N, it's legitimate. If it's E-N, you probably have some Norwegian blood in your family. I came to Waupaca as a youngster when my dad, Gustav, took a job out at the Wisconsin Veterans Home out there on Rainbow Lake, King. He had a job, it was called stationary engineer. To this day, I don't know quite what that means. But we were provided a house, my family, my siblings and my mother and I, and we loved it out there. We saw it as a big playground. right out there on the lake, trees. It was a great place while we were there. My father, the accomplished violinist, he worked long hours during the day, and he played in 2 bands at night. So my mother did most of the child rearing. I'm sure the 5 of us, my 3 sisters, my brother, and I, ran her pretty ragged and sapped most of her energy, but she carried on as best she could, which unfortunately wasn't very long. My mom contracted the consumption. I think today you call it tuberculosis. I still remember her sitting at night, and during the day actually, out on the porch during the winter, wrapped up in quilts. People at the time thought you could freeze out the sickness. It didn't work. She died of consumption just as I turned 13. Neighbors and family friends helped care for the Henson flock for a while. My father, however, he kept right on working long hours. And I guess he loved his work too much. I say that tongue-in-cheek, loved his work. Here's why. One night, shortly after my mother died, Gustav met up with a nurse, 10 years his junior, who worked at King. The 2 of them left town in a brand new car, which Gustav purchased with the money my grandfather, my mother's father, left for us kids. Gustav Henson drove off, leaving us penniless and poverty-stricken for years to come. That was an angry time for me. I blamed my father for my mother's untimely death. I know that's illogical. Gustav took all our money, and he wrote us out of his life just when we needed him most. That's how I saw it anyway. Me, a skinny, gawky teenager who was suddenly the head of the household. I vowed not to be my father's son. I vowed to become successful and make enough money to support the family. I believe I channeled that angry energy into my musical drive to get to the top. I played the piano feverishly, day and night. I composed. I published a couple songs at a very early age. You heard one. And I continued writing musical notes on a page all my life. To date, I have had over 300 songs published. And I have another 200 written. Maybe they'll get published someday later. I suppose I should give credit where credit is due. My father, despite his selfish actions, he left me with a musical heritage and a rawness and an intensity that fueled my desires to be a success. For that, I am eternally grateful. But his desertion, it haunts me still. I sat with my mother, Henrietta, on her deathbed, holding her hand as she pleaded with me to be a role model and a provider for the younger children. Me, barely a teen, the responsibility, it scared the bejesus out of me. You want to know the truth? I kept saying to myself, why couldn't it be my father who came down with the consumption? I wanted my mother, who loved me unconditionally, to live on. But of course it didn't happen. After Henrietta was gone, I wrote a song in her memory. She had written a little poem, and she gave it to me just before she passed on. I used some of the lyrics, and I wrote the music. It's called, her title, Gentle Savior, Walk Beside Me. Linda, if you will. Thank you, Linda. Luckily, I spotted an ad in a Billboard magazine from a person who wanted someone to put poems to music. I answered the ad with a letter describing how I could play the piano. I had already composed and published some songs, and, well, I may have padded my accomplishments a little bit. But what the heck? I needed a job. As it turned out, answering that ad changed my life forever. A woman by the name of Jane Strange. I'm not kidding, okay? That was her real name, Ethwell and Strange. You can't make names up like that. Anyway, Jane came to see me after she read my letter. She lived in Menasha, right over here, Menasha, Wisconsin, and was a family member of the John Strange Paper Company. She told me she had loads of money. She was intrigued with my qualifications. Remember, this was in the day before social media, right? She didn't see my picture. She didn't hear one of my songs on YouTube. She didn't want to Zoom virtually. No. She traveled to Wapaka based on the letter I sent to her, snail mail. And when we met face to face, she was taken aback. I was only 14. I told her about my mother's death, my father's running off and leaving us kids destitute. I was an orphan. But Jane Strange recognized I was an orphan with musical talent. And she invited me to join her in Menasha. She promised to pay for music lessons and to find me a good home. She played a pivotal role in my career. I have plenty of money and great connections. I'm quoting her here. She said, and when you finish your schooling, you will definitely earn more money in Menasha than you ever could in Wapaka. Now remember, I promised my mother to provide for my siblings. And so to Menasha I went. And she became my Aunt Jane. Okay, I get it. You might be uncomfortable with the relationship, a teenage boy and a middle class or a middle-aged woman. But it was a different time then, right? I didn't see the move as being foolhardy or abandoning my siblings or even weird in some romantic way. No, I saw it as an opportunity. I saw it as a lifeline, and I was right. A couple years after I moved to Menasha, Jane's hometown of Menasha scheduled a huge celebration on the 4th of July, 1912. It was called Homecoming. Jane was asked to provide a song for the grand event. Thousands of people were invited. Thousands of people showed up. And I wrote the music. Jane wrote the lyrics. We called the song the Homecoming Song. It was the hit of the festival. People loved that song, and immediately after, I heard people humming the melody all over the parade grounds. It was wonderful. See if you like it. Linda. Well, not bad if I say so myself. That song and that homecoming event with thousands of people listening and praising my talents, well, that sent my ego into high gear. The Neenah Daily Times, the newspaper of the area, called me one of the cleverest pianists in the state of Wisconsin. And Jane thought of me as a child prodigy, though I wasn't really a child any longer. I was 16 and thought I had the world by the tail. Aunt Jane rewarded me with a trip to New York City. We went and visited Carnegie Hall and Metropolitan Opera. I was thrilled and honored to meet musicians that Jane knew personally. My confidence level was at a point where someday I could see myself playing in those same venues. When we returned to the Fox River Valley, Jane helped me get a job at the Merrimack Theater in Neenah, where I played the piano for silent movies. I also played, I think I made a note here, for the Doty Theater in Appleton. Now, let me explain. When the silent movie is playing, I have to sync the piano right along with the action. Some days, I only had an hour to look over the music. Some days, even less. It didn't matter if the story was about cowboys or pirates at sea or cops and robbers. I watched John Barrymore, Lillian Gish, Buster Keaton, Lon Chaney, and a lot more Hollywood stars move about on that huge screen to my piano playing. And let me tell you, without me, if you ever watched one, the movie had no life. Sometimes I played 30 or 40 minutes straight. And guess what? I played in the dark. Can you imagine? To make the moviegoers happy, I always played my best. Sometimes I even improvised, but don't tell the theater owners that. Playing for silent movies was fun. I made money, and I sent some money back to Wapaka to help with my siblings. My promise to my mother. I graduated from Neenah High School and went on to Lawrence College in Appleton, received organ lessons there, and I also learned to play the saxophone. Aunt Jane paid for my tuition. Both those instruments, the organ and the saxophone, helped my career. I wrote more songs, some with my words, some with lyrics from a poem written by Jane Strange. Here's a little ditty that we collaborated on. Jane wrote the words, I wrote the music. It's called When the Evening Shades Are Falling. Linda. Thank you, Linda. Now, lest you think I was only playing the piano and concentrating on my musical career, well, think again. Because in 1918, the First World War, the war to end all wars, was going on in France, and I joined the Navy. I was stationed at the Great Lakes Naval Station in northern Illinois. Like most young men, I wanted to do my patriotic duty. I didn't have that gun-toting, soldier-like physique or mentality, so, with my musical background, I was inducted into the John Philip Sousa Marching Band. It was quite an honor. I put my saxophone talents to good use. The band that I was in, and there were several bands, but the band that I was in was scheduled to barnstorm the country selling war bonds, and the famous legal mind of the time joined our group, Clarence Darrow. Might have heard of him from the Monkey Trial. He joined our group to bring in bigger crowds. But unfortunately, the tour was cut short by the Spanish flu pandemic. You see, history does repeat itself. Can't seem to avoid pandemics, can we? Our band was called back to the base, and I spent most of my time playing for dying soldiers. Did you know that over 20,000 American soldiers died of the Spanish flu before they ever left for Europe? Bodies were buried in trenches. And by the war's end, more American soldiers died of disease than combat wounds. It was terrible. We all wore masks, and thank God I didn't die. After my military career, I returned to Menasha, and I found a job playing at the Oshkosh Cafe. I met a man in Oshkosh. No, that's not how it went, actually. He heard me playing and came to meet me. His name was Dan Barton. He was fascinated with the music of silent pictures, and he started building show organs. Big monstrosities, huge creations. He called his invention the Bartola. Get it? His name, Dan Barton. I like Dan. He taught me a lot. Taught me how the Bartola worked, and it was great in the theater because it made lots of sounds of other musical instruments. One person could sound almost like an entire orchestra. When Dan opened a store in Chicago, he encouraged me to come down to demonstrate the Bartola's sound to prospective buyers. Me, a country boy from central Wisconsin, being asked to come to downtown Chicago to work and to live. It was like giving candy to a baby. I was intoxicated with the idea. Playing the organ and the piano is what brought me to Chicago. I didn't know how long I was going to live there, but as it turned out, I called the Windy City home for the next 40 years. Funny, isn't it? How certain random encounters can lead to amazing experiences. Those unsuspecting changes of life, just like that. I saw it as another step up the ladder to my musical success, and Dan promised we would both get rich. Don't worry, Wisconsin cheesehead. I didn't give up all contact with Wisconsin. No, sir. Aunt Jane came to visit on occasion. She was still my financial patron. My sister Arlene came on occasion. Jane's generosity allowed me to receive music lessons at the American Conservatory of Music. And I continued to compose. In fact, I was encouraged to expand my range of musical compositions. Here's an example. I wrote and published a few polkas. You all know what a polka is, coming from central Wisconsin. Polish and German groups can't seem to get together for any reason without playing a polka. If I went to one wedding reception to hear a polka, I went to 100. Anyway, even though I'm Danish through and through, I recognize the popularity of polkas. So I wrote this one, appropriately called the Windy City Polka. Linda? Whoa, hold on. Sorry to stop you, Linda. I should tell you, but before she continues, I also wrote the music. I'm sorry, the words to the music, but I can't sing worth a lick. So I'm going to just give you the words, at least to the first verse. There's a ballroom in Chicago, just a small room where they all go. There's a band they call the Hungry Five, playing Windy City Jive. Lovers all go frantic, because their music's so romantic. When they're playing, all are swaying to this tune. Pretty cool song, huh? There's lots more verses, but I won't bore you, though. At your next wedding reception, you might request the Windy City Polka. And by the way, I didn't see anybody up dancing. Must not be enough Germans and Poles in this group, I guess. Oh well, it's still a catchy tune. My life in Chicago was a whirlwind at that time, networking and bumping into famous people. Not all musicians either. I started to make a list, you know. I had all these notes and I thought, well, I better start writing them down. So I started a list of famous people and places so that I won't forget. Here's the first one. I'll give you just a few from my upcoming autobiography. The first name I wrote down is a man's name, Tony Wons, W-O-N-S. He actually is from Menasha, or was from Menasha. His parents immigrated from Poland. He was a poet, and he had a show on WGN radio in Chicago. He asked me to play background music for years as he recited poetry. I also played the organ on his show as well. Later, WGN asked me to do my own show, and I played the piano 15 minutes a day live for years. Tony was a great guy. I will forever be in his debt for giving me a big break. I met a lot of famous people through radio shows, like Geraldine Farrar, Jack Dempsey, the great boxer, Eleanor Roosevelt, Rudolph Valentino, and the great writer Pearl Buck. I'll think of more, because there were lots more, but that's all I've written so far. Here's the next person on my list. My music instructor, Frank Van Droosen at the American Conservatory of Music. Name probably doesn't mean too much to you. I was his prize student, though. And so he introduced me to a man named Frederick Stock. Don't know that person? Well, he was a big name in Chicago. He was the conductor of the Chicago Symphony. After he heard me play, Frederick Stock wanted me to join his group to play the concert organ at Symphony Hall. Wow, you know, big building right down there on Michigan Avenue. Pretty neat offer, huh? No offense to you classical music lovers out there, but I didn't take the job. I was flattered. I felt proud. But I wanted more freedom to write and play my own stuff. If Beethoven, Brahms, and Mozart, if they wrote ragtime, well, I'd be right there along with them. But they were too stiff for me. Here's a chance to hear them side by side. Linda, my master piano player, Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, if you will. Okay. That's enough before I fall asleep. How about a reprisal of Rattlesnake Rag? Oh yes, that ragtime sound, that's mother's milk to me. The nectar of the gods, the bee's knees. Ragtime was the Roaring Twenties trademark, right? A departure from the sleepy sounds of the 19th century, at least in my opinion. Next on my list, the Asher Brothers. They owned the Crystal Theater in Chicago. They hired me to play Dan Barton's Bartola. My only concession was my name. They had a small outdoor marquee. They said my name was too long and sounded too much like a woman. So they decided to call me Eddie, E-D-D-Y, no other spelling. E-D-D-Y. And from that day forward, little-known Ethel Hansen disappeared, thank God, and Eddie Hansen became the character that we all love today. The first night I showed up at the Crystal Theater, I looked up on the marquee and I saw my name, Eddie Hansen, in big letters, and I said, I made it! And then I turned and I also said, take that, Gustav Henson, wherever you are. Next on my list is the Chicago Theater. I earned the job of playing the show organ at the Chicago Theater. There was a great number of keyboard players from all over the world who auditioned, but I was chosen. Now, the Chicago Theater is an iconic building in Chicago, as famous as Madison Square Garden is to New York City, or the Golden Gate Bridge is to San Francisco. It opened in 1921 and could seat nearly 4,000 people. Imagine that. The whole city of Waupaca in 1921 could fit in that one theater. Over 1 million people a year came to the most famous theater in the Windy City, and it was packed most nights when I played. It had a huge theater organ, not a Bartola. I must admit, Dan, it was your competitor. It was a Wurlitzer. No offense, Dan, but I took the job anyway. Next on my list, oh, by the way, the audition to get that job. Most people today, when they audition for a singing part, musical part, they pick up the music ahead of time, practice, and then come in for the audition. For me, I came to the audition, and music was put in front of me for the first time in my life, the first time I laid eyes on it, and I had to play that song. And I still won the job. The Arsonia Club, that was my favorite nightclub. It was located in Chicago's Tin Pan Alley. Most people think Tin Pan Alley is associated with New York City, but most large cities had their own Tin Pan Alley. It simply means an area where music composers and publishers and agents and theater junkies hung out. I met actors, musicians, flappers, and theater people. After the shows, we'd go to the Arsonia Club right nearby. It was a great place. And it also attracted other people as well. One night, I had a drink with public enemy number 1, John Dillinger. When I introduced myself to him, he didn't know who I was. When he told me who he was, I was a little taken aback. But he assured me he never killed anyone. He just robbed banks. He told me he became a robber because his family was so poor that his father could not buy his sister, John Dillinger's sister, a winter coat. So he found a quick source of money, the bank, and robbed banks ever since. Partygoers at the Arsonia Club often stayed till the wee hours of the night, or morning rather, and we had lots of fun. Next on my list is somebody you probably do know, Gene Autry, the singing cowboy. He made me a lot of money. Yes, he did. I wrote a song. It's called At the End of the Sunset Trail, and he liked it, and he sang it, and it got nationwide exposure. So after that, the royalties came rolling in. I suppose you want to hear that famous song. Again, I'm no Gene Autry when it comes to singing, and I can't ride a horse. Neither did Gene, for what I understand. But I'll have my lovely pianist, Linda, play you a bit of it. I wrote the words, too. Okay? And here are the opening lines of At the End of the Sunset Trail. Old-time memories come a-stealing, and they thrill me through and through. Set me longing just to go, dear, down the sunset trail with you. Well, I thought I had the tiger by the tail in those days. Gene Autry singing my song and all. I was making $500 a week. Lived in a penthouse. I had a valet, driver too, the whole 9 yards. Trouble was, I was spending $1,000 a week. But I didn't forget my siblings. I sent some of that money back home to the family farm so we wouldn't go bankrupt. That song about the sunset, turns out it was a bit of a precursor, a sign of what was disappearing just around the corner. In 1931, a new movie, The Jazz Singer with Al Jolson, came out, and most of you probably heard the talking movie. People went crazy over talking movies all over the country, wildly popular. But here's the thing. You know the old saying from your high school physics teacher, whenever you have an action, you have a reaction. Right? Talking pictures were great, but it was the death knell for theater organs and piano players of silent movies everywhere. For 4 years, I was on the top of the entertainment world playing at the Chicago Theater. A few months after The Jazz Singer rolled out, I lost my job. The Wurlitzer started collecting dust. I was still playing piano at WGN, but my income dropped like a stone. It was a tough time to be a musician in the 30s. There was the Great Depression, Prohibition, and musicians were forced to join unions, had to pay hefty dues just to get a gig. The city of Chicago was also changing, taken over by lots of gangsters and mobsters and thugs and corrupt politicians, yada, yada, yada. Eventually, I lost my job at the radio station, too. My personal life went south at about the same time. I was married to a wonderful woman named Evelyn. She was beautiful, sexy, fun-loving, full of love. She spent much of her day fixing herself up, nails, hair, shopping, buying fancy clothes, mostly on my dime. At night, she went out on the town, with or without me. It wasn't that bad. If that wasn't bad enough, she was into drugs. She got me into drugs as well. She smoked cigarettes all the time, 2-3 packs a day, and I guess that and the life in the fast lane did her in because her doctor said she died of emphysema. I miss her and the good times, but we were not a compatible couple. It took me a long time to get off the drugs. I went through hell, but I put that behind me, and to this day, I don't even take an aspirin. No, sir. That life's in the past. But after Evelyn, I did look for a little companionship. Every so often, I found myself visiting a friendly house on Chicago's Clark Street and couldn't help but write a song about it. And I called it the Clark Street Rose. Of course, I'm not going to give you any details of my rose, so don't ask. Linda. Nice. There was one item from my life as a big shot in Chicago that I held on to, a spiffy sports car. I loved that vehicle with all of its glittering chrome and big engine, but it led to a serious accident. You can't blame my driving because I never owned a driver's license in my life. Wasn't even my chauffeur's fault. The driver of the other car ran right into us, and I'm lucky to have survived it all. I spent months in and out of hospitals after that. I had a smashed hip, a smashed pelvis. It took me at least 3 years to get my walking proper again. I became an expert on using crutches. During my recuperation, I had lots of time to think about my life, the fame, the money, the women I loved, the lifestyle I lived, and ultimately the lifestyle I lost. It was a trying time, and I don't mind admitting that my mind was often tormented. My sister, Arlene, came down for a short visit and told me that Aunt Jane died of a stroke. It was awful. I found myself alone for the most part. I was still in Chicago, my siblings in Wisconsin. My name as an entertainer was fading fast. And most of my professional friends I once had in Chicago moved to Hollywood, which was fast becoming the mecca of the entertainment world. I had a lot of time to reflect, and sometimes I found myself crying all alone. I wrote this next song during those dark days, and I simply called it Solitude. Here are the opening words. Laugh, and the world laughs with you. But weep, and you weep alone. The sad old world will share in the mirth, but has troubles enough of its own. Those were certainly dark days for me, I admit. But I came through that period of despair, and I thought of myself as a durable Dane. In fact, I believed I was a survivor and earned a second chance at life. So after 40 years, I left Chicago. I moved back to Waupaca. I visited my siblings out on the family farm just north of town, though I live at 201.5 North Main Street. I could still play and write some songs. All I needed was access to a piano. And you know, good things happen to people sometimes just by being in the right spot at the right time. Just like serendipitously, I met Dan Barton in Oshkosh, remember? That led to me going to Chicago. Well, a fellow from Appleton, name of Al Rollo, came to Waupaca on business. He heard me play, probably down at Simpson's, I would guess, and thought I should be recorded. I'm talking vinyl albums. 33 1/3 discs, and I know they're prehistoric for some of you in the audience. But they were all the rage back in the 50s, 60s, 70s. El Rollo sold Hammond organs and owned a small recording studio over in Appleton. He invited me to come over, and I recorded several albums. I don't think local music stores carry them anymore. You might try that internet thing. You could maybe find some yet. Seems ragtime doesn't appeal to the young today. Now it's rap and pop and rock and who knows what all. But there's a lifetime of musical history detailed in these pages and notes. In fact, I'm still here. The fact that I'm still here tells you that I haven't finished it quite yet. I still play a little piano, have a beer with friends now and again. No hard stuff. I'm too old for that. I often reflect on the ups and downs that I had. I think of my loving mother, Henrietta, Aunt Jane, Evelyn, and all the friends I made in my career. Perhaps you'll hear one of my songs in the future when you least expect it. That wild ragtime beat might be the background music for a movie you see or a television show. There's always a place for a good ragtime song. Enjoy it, but don't get too close. You know why. It's been quite a life. quite a ride. And now it's time for me to get back to work, writing words now, not musical notes. So in fitting fashion, I'll leave you, my hometown audience, with one last song appropriately titled A Song of Life. Linda. There we go. Okay, now she's going to play Rattlesnake Rag. Thank you, Linda. Thank you. Thank you.